Now, people make a big deal out of the fact that you endorsed Joe Biden in 2020, and now you're running against him. And the reason what was the reason you endorsed him in 2020, and what has changed since?
Yeah, one, I was thoroughly convinced that we needed an anti-fascist coalition, and that included the kind of milquetoast, warmongering neoliberals like Biden. And now it's fairly clear Biden had 4 years. He had 4 years to steal the thunder from any kind of Trump challenge. 4 years to try to speak to the needs of poor and working people. 4 years to try to cut back on the military adventurism. That's been characteristic of his whole career. And it's clear to me now that if the only opposition to the escalating neo-fascism in the country is going to be Biden, or Biden-like, then the fascism's coming anyway. We're going to have alternative vision, alternative institutions, alternative infrastructures that has an alternative passion. And so if all we can do is produce democratic administrations that are caretakers, postponers of the Trump or Trump-like candidates, then the fascism's coming anyway. The only way you really get at the roots of fascism is to break from the corporate duopoly, to show how the two-party system is an impediment for the unleashing not only of American democracy, but also trying to dismantle the empire in terms of the 800 military units around the world and the military budget taking 57 cents for every dollar. And so in that sense, there's been a shift. There's no doubt about that. Now, keep in mind, I supported Ralph Nader and Jill Stein. And in between, I had early supported Bill Bradley, and I had supported John Kerry as a kind of anti-right-wing coalition too. So that my jazz-like activities certainly can be characterized at times with a certain kind of inconsistency, but it's the timing of it. Each moment has its own context.
So now our friend Nick Cruz says that many climate activists have no idea how much they destroyed all their credibility by endorsing and supporting Joe Biden, the Nord Stream pipeline bomber, and the largest eco-terrorist in modern human history, for president. Why should anyone take climate or environmental issues seriously when you obviously do not? Now, what do you say back to that kind of critique that by endorsing him, you lose your credibility?
Well, it becomes, I think, I've been on my dear brother's show a number of times, and I think there's always a certain force in the argument of trying to be consistently third party across the board, having no relation whatsoever to the bourgeois politicians. I think there's force to that. But I think the credibility that one has really is holistic. It's wholesale rather than just retail. And the credibility that you have in regard to being consistently against war, consistently against capital, consistently against white supremacy, even if it has different kind of stances from one election to the next. That would be one of the ways in which I would try to respond to that. That would be the beginning of a response to that.
Okay. Here's another tweet from Nick. He says the same professional managerial class gaslighters want us to take it easy on Bernie. They use civility politics as a weapon so they can comfortably sell out. The working class must reject this and start holding these people accountable for selling us out. So Bernie has sold us out, and I don't need you to call him a sellout or anything. That's fine. But I do want to see, this is your response, because Bernie was asked about your campaign, and he said it shouldn't happen, and he's against it, and he's endorsing right. Biden, and of course that is just garbage. And so this is how you responded.
And you even in love, people have deep disagreements about these things. But I think again, he's fearful of the neo-fascism of Trump.
So when my what I would say to you here, and this is a big point, and I'm trying to impress upon you going forward, that when you do that, you sound a little bit like Joe Biden, and what you're doing is you're giving a pass to Bernie Sanders and anybody else for voting lesser of two evils. So you're endorsing the Democrats' message in their campaign. And so now people can dismiss your candidacy and say, well, we got to worry about the neo-fascism of Trump, as if Joe Biden isn't worse which he is. He's a bigger fascist. And he just crushed a union strike on the railroad, which is the definition of fascism. He's now trying to saber rattle with two nuclear powers, nuclear war, nothing more important than that. And what he's doing in Ukraine, you know exactly what he's doing, right? So he's the worst warmonger in the world. 300,000 Ukrainians have already been slaughtered in this proxy war that was provoked by NATO, which you know. So when do you think that when you say that about, when you call Donald Trump a neo-fascist and you don't say that about Joe Biden, what do you say when I tell you that you're undercutting your own campaign and you are propping up the Democratic message, which is that they are the lesser of two evil and you have to vote for Joe Biden so we don't have fascism? By the way, we already have fascism. As we all know, the fascism is the joining of corporate and government to screw the worker. And that's exactly what Joe Biden, the Democrats, and Pete Buttigieg did. And so they will keep doing it, and they're not stopping it. And they're also for censorship, which is the hallmark of fascism. So this idea that Donald Trump is more of a fascist than Joe Biden undermines your own campaign. There's no doubt about that. And so what I would encourage you to stop doing that. What do you say back?
No, we deeply disagree on that, though, brother. I don't think, and this is where I disagree with Nick too, that, and I appreciate your advice here, you know, cast in a respectful way, but we do, and I disagree with Brother Nick on this too, that man, I just got back from Mississippi. You know that. You know what the Jenkins and Parkins, the two brothers brutalized by the police. There at the church, the Klan still running wild, not just with votes, but terrorizing black folk. The Goon Squad finally got caught by the two lawyers, Brother Malik and Brother Trent. Now, what does that mean? That means that when you talk about fascism, you're talking not just about the rule of big money, not just the rule of big military, not just the rule of corporate power, so that it's oligarchic in essence, but you're also talking about dictatorial rule, no elections, the elimination of dissident voices, and then the scapegoating of the most vulnerable, which it could be immigrants, it could be workers, it could be black people, Jews, Arabs, and so forth. See, with under Biden, what you have is a fascist dimension domestically, especially against black folk and others. You and I, the very fact that we're having this dialogue without being eliminated overnight, a fascist regime could completely call into question with the use of arbitrary power. That's what happens in the mass incarceration regime vis-a-vis poor black people and others. Right? So that is the fascist dimension. Similarly so in terms of militarism abroad. So that there's fascist elements, my brother, there's fascist dimensions. But with Trump, when you have calling into question transfer of power and so forth, that is not the same thing. And so that doesn't undermine my campaign at all. The campaign's about truth.
100% undermines your campaign. 100%. You're shooting yourself right in the dick before you even start. So that's just bad. You're getting bad advice. I don't know who's advising you, but they're giving you horrible advice.
January. I'm a free man. I'm a free man, brother.
So January.
But I want to hear your argument. I want to hear your argument as to how Biden is more fascist than Trump. Just lay it out right quick.
Well, I'll tell you right now, the reason why the deep state Russiagated Trump was because he wouldn't bomb enough to calm them down. So he wouldn't do enough bombing. The reason they impeached him because he wouldn't ship arms to Nazis in Ukraine, and he was against that. So that's
are you defending Trump as somehow being a person who is? I don't understand. I don't stand your argument at this point, though, man. What are we talking about?
Okay, so there's.
I want to understand what the content of your argument is, because one can, in fact, bring critique to bear on the system as a whole with the two corporate wings, but somehow, what do you say to trans and gays and lesbian brothers and sisters in terms of their rights?
So that's again. Joe Biden is responsible for the mass incarceration, not Donald Trump. Who is more responsible for black and brown people being locked up and America being the largest penal colony in the world? Is it Donald Trump or would it be Joe Biden? By the way, this conversation is a loser for your campaign.
Well,
sitting here trying to make the argument.
It could be a loser for you too, though.
Trying to make the argument.
You trying to make the case that somehow the Democrats are more fascist than the Republicans. The fascism cuts across the board. But
that's not how you say it, though. You say it's only Donald Trump. You don't say it cuts across the board. You call Joe Biden milquetoast, and you call Donald Trump a fascist. So you're not saying Joe Biden is a fascist, really?
I said there's fascist dimensions to the Biden project. You're absolutely right.
It's like you're campaigning for Joe Biden almost when you're doing this. That's what it sounds like.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous.
But that's what I'm not saying you are doing that. I'm saying that's what it sounds like.
What it sounds like to you. That's what it sounds like to you. And you got a right to be wrong. You got a right to be right. It sounds like to you. But it doesn't sound like that to a whole host of others at all, though, brother. Not at all.
All right. Again, I'm saying this out of love for you because I do have deep love for you. I have deep respect for you. And we agree on almost everything except the message of your campaign, right? That's the only thing. I would hope it would become even more focused. Well, let me just put it this way.
But are you suggesting that the message should be that Biden is a greater fascist than Trump? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not saying that you should talk about fascism or any of that stuff. I think you should.
No, fascism is very real. I think you don't think fascism is real in the country?
We're living in it. We're living in fascism.
But I'm talking about escalating in terms of intensity.
It has since Biden became president. It certainly has escalated in intensity. They've censored everybody. They've crushed unions. They've started another war, and now they're saber rattling with 2 nuclear powers. I don't know how I don't know how worse it could get. And by the way, he still hasn't let people out of prison. He still hasn't given student loan. He's still denying us health care. He's an enemy of the worker and a tool of military-industrial complex in Wall Street. There's no bigger fascist in the country than Joe Biden. The reason why black and brown people are locked up, again, isn't because of Trump. It's because of brother Biden. And Joe Biden is proud of that. He brags about that. He brags about the crime bill, and he will never apologize for it. So I'm just letting you know that I really want your campaign to pick up traction. This is the opposite way to do it. Who's ever advising you sounds like an infiltrator.
But why do you keep saying advise me? I'm thinking for myself, brother. I'm a free
I don't mean to insult
man.
you. That's not
just a question of advising.
Okay.
I don't ask who's advising you. You think of yourself. You're a free man too, aren't you?
You're right. You're right. Okay. I was trying to put it in a nice way.
I use that kind of language, my brother. You want to be respectful.
I'm trying to be respectful. That was my.
I appreciate it. Okay. I know it look like it's hard sometimes, but I appreciate it. But we just have disagreements on these things.
Again,
undermining. If I undermine the campaign for you, then you're free to have your own view and vision, and people are free to listen to you and be persuaded or not. And I've got mine. I'm listening for your insight. Absolutely right. No doubt about that.
So let me just say this. So the point of running a third-party campaign is to offer an alternative to the 2 major parties, to bring together disaffected members of those parties, along with independents and others who feel alienated from the political system as it exists. And the best way to do this is by running on economic issues that unite us, but which neither major party is willing to address because they're both beholden to the same powerful corporate interests. The Democratic Party long ago abandoned the working class in favor of beating the drum on cultural issues, and now that's all the Democrats have to run on. So if voters are looking for a party running on trans rights and calling Donald Trump and his supporters white supremacists, they can already vote for Democrats. The role of a third party is to focus not on the identity politics that divide us, but on core economic issues that unite us along class lines, like Christian Smalls did at Staten Island. Do you think he led with LGBTQ trans rights and white supremacy, or do you think he organized along class lines? That's what we have to do. You have to organize, meet people where they are. So what is your plan to organize along class lines, or are you going to keep talking about white supremacy and all those identity politics, which are there, not from the ground up, from the top down, to make sure we stay divided? What is your plan to organize along class lines?
Well, I appreciate again the clarity and candor of what you have to say. We have profound disagreements, brother. When I organize around white supremacy, I'm not making some utilitarian calculation. I'm speaking as a black man who comes out of a tradition that's been terrorized and traumatized by white elites. And that does not in any way mean it takes me away from class issues. Class issues are crucial. Class issues are fundamental. But it doesn't mean that I'm putting up with white supremacy. One of the problems is that you get too many folk who want to talk class, and can't say a mumbling word about white supremacy, police brutality. Can't say a mumbling word hardly. Or when they do say it, you call it identity politics as if it's not connected to class. I'm hitting these head on. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to strikes. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to greedy bosses. I'm standing with the workers when it comes to obsession with profits and the needs not in any way being satisfied. But I'll never for a minute be silent or not raising my voice in terms of vicious treatment of black people, indigenous people, gay brothers, lesbian sisters, or trans. It's not an either or. And that's where you and I have a deep, profound disappointment. So if I see, for example, if I watch your show and I notice you hardly say a mumbling word about white supremacy because it's some kind of identity politics and I'm against it, but I don't want to talk about it. I only want to talk about what people hold in common. Well, black people are not going to hold it in common if you don't say a word about white supremacy, but maybe some of your white friends will. So who are you talking about? You're talking about in common. Are you talking about just a majority or what, my dear brother? I will never, ever in a million years not talk about vicious legacies of white supremacy, male supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and others. But class will always be very much at the center. What brings you and I together is what? Our fundamental solidarity with working classes, not just here, but around the world. But oftentimes when I hear about your show and you say, well, you know, these identity politics issues get in the way. No, it's 100%. Not getting in the way. They're not getting in the way.
100%. They're used by so the Democrats, that's all they have to run on. And when you say that stuff, you just sound like a Democrat because that's all they have. So if
exactly
you
wrong.
need
if to talk about the dignity of black people in the face of vicious white supremacy makes me sound like a Democrat, you got the wrong earplug.
Okay.
You're not listening clearly. Because if you can't hear the critique of Wall Street, if you can't hear the critique of militarism, if you can't hear the critique of his foreign policy in Ukraine, and all you can hear when they talk about white supremacy is identity politics, then something's wrong with your earplug, though, bro. Something's wrong with you. Okay. We just have deep disagreement with that. But
it's disappointing.
It is what it is. You are profoundly disappointing in that sense. But I still love you, brother.
I still love you too. I still love you too. I know you. I know you. I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm talking about having a campaign. I'm not. There's a okay. So.
But the campaign is not about utilitarian calculation either. I don't look at black people like a utilitarian calculation. I can't say nothing because these people over here somehow are alienated. I'm telling the truth. I'm fighting for justice. And if people feel as if to talk about white supremacy is alienating, then they're going to be alienated. I'm talking about my mama. I'm talking about my daddy. This ain't no abstract dialogue about politics in the Machiavellian sense. Not at all,
so
my brother.
When Bernie caught...
We marched together for class politics. We march together because that's real. But if you think that talking about white supremacy is just identity politics, we got deep disagreement. That's all. So I'm sorry to go on. And
no.
You're very kind to let me go.
No, go right ahead. No, go right ahead. I don't. And honest, everything I'm saying here coming from my heart. I want your campaign to succeed, and I want you to have the strongest campaign possible. But Bernie caught on because he would always, if he was given a cultural question or an identity politics question, he would always bring it back to class and economics. And it doesn't, well, here I was talking to one of Bernie's campaign managers, and this is what he said. Yes, I personally agree white supremacy is one of the causes. But if I lose two potential allies because they roll their eyes and stop listening before I get to their concerns, I've already lost. The civil rights advancements, women's rights, the environmental movement, they didn't happen because people like my dad voted Democrat because that stuff mattered to them. It happened because Democrats appealed to them on economic issues, and a lot of the Democrats they voted for because of economics also happened to vote for that other stuff. And it doesn't work in the inverse. So I'm just giving that to you.
Right. No, I understand. But you can see again how I disagree. Keep in mind, bro. civil rights movement was not because of white folk doing X or Y. It was because there was a social movement led by black people in the South that was multiracial, but led primarily by black folk. And neither party would have done anything without that social movement.
100% right. You're 100% right. No doubt about it. And I think
but that's my tradition. That's my tradition. How can you talk about?
No, I love to hear you talk about all that stuff, and that's good for a radical black activist who's representing his community. But I'm just trying to impress upon you that there's better ways to run a presidential campaign. And so that for a black radical activist, that's great. That's honey. But for someone who's trying to appeal to a wide swath of people, disaffected Republicans, independents, people, that's a death for that campaign. That's my opinion. That's just...
Well, yeah, we'll have to see, but keep in mind, though, brother, that one, I've never, ever said that all of the followers of Brother Trump are fascists. I said he's a neo-fascist Pied Piper. His followers, 1 out of 8 went with Bernie, 1 out of 12 went with Barack Obama. He's got a heterogeneous, diverse group. And I can speak my language of truth and justice as it connects to capitalism, imperialism, white supremacy, male supremacy, transphobia, whatever it is. And there's going to be some people who listen, and there's going to be some people who don't. But this is not just a question of political calculation and Machiavellian reflection, brother. This is about the quest for truth and justice. You got to be real. You got to be authentic. I'm not listening to consultants who tell me to use this particular kind of language with this group and this kind of language with that group. That is the essence of managerial bourgeois politics. I reject it.
Hey, so come see us live on tour. We're going to be in Detroit. That's Rochester, Michigan, Tampa, Boca Raton, Orlando, Dallas, Houston, San Diego, Bloomington, Illinois, where I went to college, Indianapolis, Levittown, New York, and Red Bank, New Jersey. Go to jimmydore.com for a list of all those shows.